Salt of the Earth Farm Stories is proudly brought to you by Grig Media.
Farming from a wheelchair. Lincoln Budge's story is nothing short of incredible. A horrific car accident left him paralysed from the waist down. Lincoln faced challenges far beyond his physical injury. He struggled with alcoholism, he lost loved ones, and nearly lost his own life on a motorbike. And his rock bottom turned out to be far different than most might expect. But instead of giving up, Lincoln reinvented himself through farming, becoming not only a skilled farmer, but also the founder of the Change One Life project, which teaches people to make smart choices and consider the consequences of their actions. We talk about his journey of losing and gaining friends, his achievements in water skiing and snow skiing, and a world ranking. Lincoln is focused on improving his farm and the environment. This episode is a must listen for anyone seeking inspiration and a fresh perspective on resilience and change. Good morning, Lincoln.
Good morning.
Mate, thanks for having me here today. We're sitting here at your cattle yards. We're overlooking your magnificent property. I can see a gully, I can see birds, a dam, and some cattle grazing very peacefully in your paddock there. What do you see?
I see all of that and a whole lot of work.
Yeah, I bet.
It's an amazing place where we are here. I just love the country and the landscape around this area, the hills in the background and everything I really appreciate and love in this area.
Mate, can you tell me whereabouts are we exactly? We're in northeast Victoria.
So we're just outside of Yakandanda, which is just a small rural town in northeast Victoria, as you said. We're on a dirt road where there's basically no traffic. There's a couple of surrounding farms, but other than that, we sort of don't have anyone or anything too close to us, which is really nice and peaceful.
It is peaceful, isn't it? So how many acres are we on here?
So I've got 2 blocks, 100 acres each. Well, I half own with Mum. It's between me and Mum. We own it all.
Fantastic. And what are you running?
Beef cattle, so mostly breeding, and depending when we get lease properties, we sometimes do a bit of fattening and finishing of cattle as well, but predominantly breeding at the moment.
Yeah, Angus.
Angus beef, yeah.
Now, mate, are you comfortable in telling me how you ended up in a wheelchair?
Yeah, so what was it, 17 years ago, so the night before my 21st birthday, I was going away for the weekend with some mates, camping, full driving, drinking, just having fun as young blokes do.
When you're 21?
I was passenger in my vehicle and we lost control on a bend between Corryong and Bigara, and we went over a 40-foot embankment, rolled and hit a tree and finished in a lagoon in the Murray River. And as a result, I sustained a spinal injury at waist level, and that left me paralysed from the waist level down. So,
Mate, I'm so sorry. And it took quite a few hours to get you out, didn't it?
yeah, so my memory's a little bit blurred from time frame. I remember everything, but reports were it was about 2 hours before they got me out of the vehicle. One, we had to wait for emergency services to get there. Then they had to cut all the roof off the vehicle, stabilise. Well, they had to stabilise the vehicle because it being in waist deep water, all that kind of stuff, middle of winter. So there was a bit of an ordeal. And then even like they wanted to airlift me from the vehicle, but they couldn't get a chopper in because of weather. So they had to winch me up the embankment and all that kind of stuff. So
the car had water in it too?
Yeah, so where I was laying, I was just out of the water. So the car was laying on its side, sort of perched on a bit of a rock or something. But you had to walk through waist deep water to get to the vehicle, which made it hard for everyone working on me in the vehicle because it was middle of August in the high country, so pretty cold and a fair bit of an ordeal. So
absolutely, mate. And then a big trip back into Albury and then to Melbourne?
Yeah, so the hospital report showed I got to Albury at 5:30 in the morning. We had the accident 10 o'clock the night before, so it was a long night. Slow trip back to Albury. Like the amount of pain I was in, they couldn't drive fast because every bump, every corner, every movement of the ambulance hurt. But then I was having reactions to medications that was making me spew, so I have to roll me on my side so I didn't choke on my own spew and all that fun stuff. And then and also not knowing the extent of my injuries at that stage, trying to not do more damage to my spine than what was already done. Once got to Albury, had scans and confirmed had a broken back and had to go to Melbourne for surgery. So I got airlifted to Melbourne Saturday afternoon. So yeah.
What's the end result, mate? You were paralysed from the waist down, is that
Yeah,
right?
so T12L1, so I've got full thoracic, no lumbar. So yeah, basically waist level down, I can't feel or move anything. Waist up, normal function. So yeah.
I can't imagine what you've been through, mate. And I guess at some stage you hit rock bottom, and your rock bottom will be different to somebody else's rock bottom. But how did you get out of that, and how did you grow to be so positive and motivated?
My rock bottom's a bit of a different one, I suppose, for someone ending up in a wheelchair. Through rehab, I was pretty positive and motivated. I guess I stayed pretty positive, but my rock bottom was probably based more around my alcohol consumption than anything. I drank a lot prior to my injury, and I had no license from drink driving, which was why I was passenger when we had the accident. And yeah, when I left rehab, I'd spoken to a few people that had been in a wheelchair for 15 years or more, and they told stories of different people that went down the lines of alcohol and drug abuse for sometimes 8-10 years before they sort of snapped out of it and got on with life in a wheelchair.
And for some reasons, I suppose, to buffer the pain, and
Yeah,
both mentally and physically.
yeah. And I could see that I was probably a high risk of going down a path like that because I drank a lot. And I sort of had been coming to realisation over a period of time that I probably needed to do something about drinking and that. So my rock bottom, I guess, was based more around and like the disability and social aspect and everything was mixed in there with it all. I sort of started the process of getting sober and moving on with life probably 2 months after I got out of rehab. I was in rehab for 3 months learning to live life with disability.
So this was rehab not just for your physical disability, but you're also going through rehab of no alcohol.
Yeah. So I was basically sober through the rehab, but I was on that many pain medications. I'd sort of swap one for the other, I guess, in a way. And then when I got out of hospital or rehab, I was drinking, not excessively, but I could see that it would potentially go down that path. I no longer had a job and things like that, so I sort of didn't have reasons to not drink during the day and things. So yeah, I had a good friend that I'd spoken to once before about alcohol, and he was a sober alcoholic. So I saw him down the street one day and told him I wanted to have a chat, and yeah, sort of one thing led to another, and sort of he supported me through AA for a couple of months, and that was all around me making the decision, I guess, to get sober. And I never intended to get rid of alcohol completely from my life, but that's the way it ended up going in the
Really,
end.
you don't touch it at all now?
Nah, not at all.
Yeah.
So best thing I ever did too. Like everything I've done since that, I think I can put down to getting rid of alcohol more than things that I've done because of the disability. But they do go hand in hand a little bit.
Oh, incredible. So how long was it after your accident that you went through AA?
So it would have been about 4 or 5 months after my injury. So, which is kind of funny too, because I lost a lot of friends when I was first in the wheelchair and that, but I think a lot of them were more based around the alcohol and getting rid of that pub scene and partying than the actual disability itself. Like some people couldn't handle seeing me in a wheelchair and stuff all that well. But yeah, I think the change of social life was more around the alcohol than than the disability.
And I guess you've gained a lot of friends too.
Yeah, definitely. Social life's just changed. I've gained friends through things I've done since that.
So were you always so positive?
To do with my disability, yes. As a kid and that, I don't know, I never saw myself as someone that was overly strong or unique or anything. I think just life experiences have sort of led me to be resilient, I guess. I've sort of had quite a few things go wrong in life growing up and stuff. Having lost a brother to a car accident when he was 10.
Oh, really? An older brother or a younger brother?
He was 2 years younger than me.
Oh, mate.
And then, almost killing myself on a motorbike drunk. Watching mum and dad go through a long, drawn-out separation. Just all those kind of things, I suppose, create a resilience within you when you're dealing with all those kind of things growing up. Yeah, you just subconsciously, I think, learn coping mechanisms and stuff. So yeah.
Mate, you're even more incredible than I thought you were. So prior to your accident, you were a keen water skier, and you were pretty keen to get back on the water.
So I was probably more keen once I was in the wheelchair. I grew up water skiing a little bit and didn't do a huge amount, but did water ski. And then once I was in the chair, I went out water skiing, and mates thought it was great because they threw me in the boat. They were supportive. They're like, "Oh, we'll carry you, we'll throw you in the boat, we'll work out how to do this." But then once they got me in the driver's seat, they thought it was great because they had a driver all day.
And I guess for some ways it was the first time they had been through something like this too.
Yeah, it was a learning curve for everyone. Like being a small country town, like I'd never been exposed to anyone with disability, and neither had they. And some mates really just stepped up, and family and brothers and that, and just didn't see an issue. They just said, well, if we need to pick you up and carry you or throw you in the boat or do whatever we need to do, we will. Some friends really stepped up in that space.
So you had to find some new gear, did you? Some new skis?
Yeah.
You were slalom skiing at one point?
Yeah, so I started off driving the boat, and that was great because I could drive the boat just as well as anyone, even regardless of my disability. And it was the first time I sort of had a sense of still being able to contribute, I suppose, and function and do things. And then it took me a while to get onto equipment for water skiing. It was sort of hard to find who knew anything about it, but I ended up getting onto a guy that was competing at the time and put me in contact with a guy in Queensland that builds disabled water skis, or sit skis, and got my first sit ski, and then I ended up competing as well in slalom at nationals twice.
At a national level, how'd you go?
Got second in Australia both times I competed.
Well done.
Which wasn't too bad for the amount of skiing I'd done at the time. Yeah.
And are you still doing a little bit of skiing?
I still water ski just socially. Alpine skiing ended up becoming a bigger part of my life.
Right.
Sort of the first couple of summers in the wheelchair got consumed with water skiing, and then winters, I always hated the cold, and I was sort of considering moving somewhere warmer or doing something, and then my youngest brother convinced me to go snow skiing, which I thought I was going to hate because I hated it when I tried it in high school. It was cold and wet and miserable, and I thought it's only going to be worse in a wheelchair. But I went up and did a camp with Disabled Winter Sports, and actually had a really good weekend.
At Falls Creek?
At Falls Creek, yeah. And then by that time in life, that was probably 2 or 3 years post-injury. So I had my licence back, I was driving, I was sort of doing everything independent in life. So it gave me another challenge to become independent snow skiing. And then it just snowballed really fast. Did a couple of development camps, and then got a phone call from the head coach of the Paralympic team.
Serious?
And wanted me to go train with them, with their development team, for a week up in New South Wales. So did that, and then that snowballed into going international and yeah, spent 4 years ski racing at international level.
You're around the world
So,
competing.
yeah. So I was spending winters mostly in Colorado, like northern winters, and then winters here in Australia, and competing internationally. So
And did I hear you were ranked in the top
yeah,
50?
yeah, I was top 50 in the world in all 4 events that I competed. So I was slowly getting my ranking better and better before I then had a big crash in Canada and blew out my shoulder and kind of ended up ending my ski racing career.
Really?
But, so I didn't make it to a Paralympics. That was the season before the Paralympics, and that injury had a few complications with having surgery and stuff that sort of drew out the recovery time to about 2 years on that in the end. So that sort of all went pear-shaped in a hurry on me.
Wow, that's incredible. But at some point you took up wheelchair basketball.
Yeah, so wheelchair basketball was actually the first sport I tried.
Right.
Because at the time it was the most accessible and easiest to find a pathway into. I played just regionally, recreationally, but then post ski racing and my shoulder injury and everything, I decided I wanted to start up a program presenting to school kids and running wheelchair basketball sessions, giving kids experience in a wheelchair so they get that first-hand experience of the difficulties associated with being in a wheelchair, but also how much fun it can be, how much you can still do in a wheelchair. Yeah, I started that up.
So you'd go around to schools with about 10 chairs or something?
Yeah, so I take 10 chairs, so we've got enough for a proper game of wheelchair basketball, and yeah, just do a presentation which is about my story and some of the stuff I've done and some of the stuff we're talking about now.
And what's that program called?
It's Change One Life Project, and that's just me sharing my story, my experiences, and then running the wheelchair basketball. So
And do these primary or secondary school kids?
right through from prep through to secondary, even adults, anyone that wants me to come along. Sometimes do it with workplaces, team building and teamwork and those kind of things. Do those kind of ones as well. So anyone, everyone and anyone really.
Great. And what's your biggest message to these kids and adults?
Changes a little bit depending on the age of the kids. Sort of the kids that are getting towards getting car licenses and getting on the road and those kind of things, it's a lot of the message is around just making good choices, not going and drink driving, because that was my biggest downfall when I was drinking and younger. I used to drink drive a lot, and as I mentioned, had a motorbike accident drunk that almost killed me and stuff. So just making good choices, basically, thinking about the consequences of what you're doing, and even bigger to that is thinking about the impacts you have on more than just yourself. So even though, like, my motorbike accident, it was just myself, I was the only person physically injured. I don't remember any of that one. I had multiple fractures to my skull, but the impact that had on the people around me was much greater than the impact it had on me.
Really?
The physical injuries recovered, took a while. I've got false front teeth and stuff now, but all that's fine. But for mum and brothers that came down and saw me on the roadside, unconscious, blood coming out of my face, spewing, and that was on the same laneway less than a kilometre from where my brother was killed. So the impact that had on them, because mum and brother and that were there when Sheldon was killed. So the PTSD that causes to people, the impacts it have on people around you. And even the Pete that helped me get sober, he came across me in that accident and knew it was alcohol related. And I knew him personally before that, but that compelled him to come and talk to me about his alcohol journey and stuff. So even though it was my choice to get on the motorbike drunk and I had the physical injuries, everyone else carries probably deeper injuries than I had in that one. Psychological injuries and the impacts that has on people around you, the community and that kind of thing. So that's that's probably one of my big messages around making smart choices, that your choices don't only impact yourself, they can have a much broader impact than you realise.
Well said, mate. And this program you're doing is making the world a better place. So thanks for doing it.
Thank
it's
you.
amazing. I guess we better talk about farming too.
Yeah.
So we're on a couple of 100 acres here, did you say?
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to meet you recently here on the property whilst shooting a video. And I've been constantly thinking, how on earth can you farm from a wheelchair? Can you tell me?
Everything's a little bit slower to start with, but I've got a 100 horsepower tractor that's got hand controls put in it. I've got four wheelers I can ride. I've got side by side. So all those kind of things, as far as getting around the property, operating machinery, I can do that. Slower, yes, particularly if I've got to get in and out of vehicles to open and shut gates.
That's one thing I've been thinking about. I pull up at a gate, I jump out of a tractor, I open the gate, I jump back in the tractor, I drive through, I close the gate, maybe 30 seconds. How do you approach that gate?
It's a process for me. I try and plan things so I don't have to open and shut gates too often. If I can, I'll open close gates before I get in the tractor and get going, and try and leave them open depending on stock. But if I'm in the tractor and I have to get out, it's get the wheelchair out, put it together, get out, open the gate. And in winter, it's even more difficult because you're dealing with mud a lot of the time too. And then get back in the tractor, drive through, and it's really frustrating if you've got to shut the gate behind you, because you've got to do that whole process again. Either that, or I try and time it when there's someone else around that can open gates. My nephew, who's about 6 or 7, he's becoming pretty useful
Handy
at opening and shutting gates, and
Good on him.
and he loves going in the tractor and stuff too. So
And feeling important too.
Yep. So it's works well for him and me when he comes and helps.
So what modifications have you made that have been most helpful?
Just having hand controls on all the vehicles so that I can operate them probably. The other thing I do want to do at some stage is put a few solar gates in so that I can actually open and close gates without having to get in and out of vehicles. I think that will have a huge impact
wouldn't it?
when I get some of that.
Is there any support available for that?
There is a little bit through TAC because I was a transport accident. There is some support, like I wouldn't be able to put solar gates on every gate on the property, but to put a few on main gates, there is some financial support for doing that kind of thing.
So what does a typical day on the farm look like for you?
Planning to do a lot more than I actually achieve generally. But no, I've come to be realistic in what I can achieve in a day. Like I get help with, like mum and brother help with actual cattle work in the yards, those kind of things that get to the point of not being safe and physically not being able to do it. So I get support with those kind of things. But feeding out, moving cattle around paddocks, all those kind of things, checking cows, I'm able to do all that stuff. And then fencing, as much as I don't like doing it, I can repair fences and restrain fences and things like that. Again, I'm slow because walking fence lines quite slow. So I normally try and get someone that's around to help when need doing those kind of things. But then just managing and planning and doing all the other things associated with farming, trying to plan improvements and things like that.
How long have you been here on this property?
Must be about 15 years now.
Right,
that
so since the
we've
accident.
owned this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a couple of years after I had the accident that we bought this property.
The video I was here shooting with you was for North East Catchment Management Authority, and they've helped fund some work to protect a gully. Can you tell me about that and what you've done?
Yeah, so we lost a heap of trees to storms and fires, and they were big old trees. And instead of revegetating them, because it was good sort of grazing areas, I had a few gullies that I decided would be better to fence off and revegetate. And I was fortunate enough to get a grant from NECMA, as you mentioned. The gully that I fenced off is about 800 or 900 metres long. So it was about 1,800 metres of fencing, fencing both sides of it.
To keep the stock
And
out?
to keep the stock out, and then planting 2,000 trees and shrubs and grasses through it all. And because we've fenced a couple of dams off in that as well, I've had to do some extra work for stock water and things like that. But it's been great. That project was good because I was able to get the prisoners from Beechworth Jail to come and help with the labour of doing all the fencing and planting all the trees.
Fantastic.
So they'd bring a team down every day or most days for a couple of weeks, I think it was. And they ran all the wires and that for the fencing.
And they dug in and had a fair crack, didn't they?
Yeah, they were good. They did a great job. And just the manpower, like the amount of work we were able to get done in those couple of weeks, just because the number of people that were coming. So yeah, it was great having them here helping with that, because, well, I don't think I wouldn't have physically been able to get around and plant the trees because of the gully I was in. I would have ended up in the bottom of the gully.
Well, it's looking fantastic. I had a look at the footage from the drone, and it's obviously working, mate. It's softer. The water is cleaner. It's leaving your property a lot cleaner. And the birds and insects are happy. And in a few years' time, the cattle will have shelter.
Yeah.
Is mustering easier now?
Yeah, other than one paddock that it's longer to get the cattle around now, but it's easier because cattle used to go down in that gully, or they'd cross it and you couldn't get vehicles across it, or there was only one spot you could. It was always a bit of a pain getting cattle through there anyway. Yeah. And that was part of my plan, was if we fence that off, yeah, you're losing some land as far as grazing land, but you're sort of changing the way you're operating as far as mustering goes and all that. And as you said, once the trees grow, we're going to have shelter for the cattle. Cattle will be able to graze in there eventually, just to
crash graze.
Just crash graze to get some of the grass down and that. But the impact it's had, as you said, it's slowing the water down. It's greener in there. I assume there's more water in the ground because the water's staying around longer and seeping in better. So.
And perhaps some more birds already?
Yeah, definitely more birds and wildlife in there, particularly the couple of dams we fenced off, because they used to get pretty mucked up from the cattle, so they've almost sort of turned into a little wetland sort of area because they were sort of swampy dams anyway. So yeah, the amount of frogs and stuff you hear in there and that, I'm sure there's plenty of other animals in there that I don't see.
That's looking awesome, and there's more growth and sedges and that around the edges.
Yeah, it's been great. Having the support of Necmar financially to be able to do it, and then the support of Landmate, which is the prisoners doing the labour and that. And
from Necmar's point of view, they're very happy with the clean water leaving the property to enter the catchment.
Yeah, and that's the whole idea of these kind of projects. Is it might be one little project on my property, but if everyone's able to sort of make water leaving their property better quality and that, it's going to have impact downstream for everyone. When you own land, you've kind of got a responsibility to try and improve it and leave it better than when you came onto it, and sort of support the environment and make things better.
Thanks, mate. You've always been quite environmentally conscious, and you're trying to use less chemicals, is that right?
Yeah, so growing up, Mum always tried to do everything organic, didn't like chemicals, or still doesn't like chemicals, so I've sort of had that ingrained in me all my life, I guess. I do use some chemicals sometimes through necessity, and it's just impossible not to, particularly like removing blackberries and stuff. Like Mum would like to go and pull them all out by hand, but I physically can't do that, so resort to some sprays. But I try and use as little amount of poisons and sprays as possible, and try and look for organic sort of alternatives and ways to operate.
And there's some great options out there now, aren't there?
Yeah.
And you were talking the other day about your interest in worm farming.
Yeah, I'm looking to put in a big worm bunker as an alternative to synthetic fertilisers and stuff. So trying to produce worm juice and worm castings using byproducts around the farm to feed the worms. And I guess there's two factors to that. It's trying to cut costs of fertilising, but also trying to do things more naturally. And with rising costs of fertilisers, sometimes it's quite difficult to have the budget to do what you need to do. So
yeah, I think if you can get your right ingredients into the worms, it ends up being like liquid gold, what you're putting onto the property.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm sure once I build it and get it operating, it'll be a bit of a learning curve as well on getting the ingredients right and getting it functioning strongly. Hopefully, yeah, we can start producing enough to sort of fertilise our property and do things more naturally.
I love that concept. And I think you're involved in not just one land care group, but possibly two.
Yeah, I mean, in a couple, kind of because of where we are, we're close to a couple of different land care groups and friends that I've got in different areas. But then, because I actually live up the Kiwa Valley, I'm part of the land care up there as well. So I sort of try and get involved with different things that land care runs.
Yeah, well done. Well, that wraps up part one of our incredible conversation with Lincoln. His story has been nothing short of moving, and trust me, the journey doesn't end there. Part two is coming your way next week, and it's packed with more powerful insights. We'll dive into Lincoln's thoughts on skepticism in farming, how he found himself bogged and had to commando crawl across a paddock just to reach his wheelchair. And that's just the beginning. Lincoln's message? Don't be afraid to take risks and give things a go. We hear about pushing through feelings of doubt, staying motivated, and achieving what others might consider impossible. There's no holding back with this man. Catch us for part two next week.